Hello, I just want to welcome everyone to another conversation with Cherie McCoy, who is my mentor and my friend and the leading practitioner of self-acceptance training. And we've had a couple of these conversations because really the times we're in have put so much pressure on everyone that there is a mental health crisis going on. And the last time we talked in December about the holidays and the unique pressure that puts on people and loneliness and isolation. And I really recommend people go back and watch that one because it's kind of its own piece. And today we're really responding. We thought we should have this conversation because we're really responding to the fact that we just came off of Mental Health Awareness Month. And June is International Mental Health Awareness Month. And what we're realizing is it's a crisis no matter what month we're in. And we need to talk about it. And because self-acceptance is such a unique way of addressing mental health, and it's why I, as a therapist, use it primarily. It's as my own main way of working with people is because it understands that trauma is held in the body and you have to go through the body to work with it. And the modality itself uses Gestalt, meditation, hypnosis, and spirituality, all of these things, this very holistic approach to transform versus looking at things as problems or as disorders that need treatment, but really as a process, a transformational process, which is what I love about it and why I use it and why it feels to me that I never get burned out from it because I'm in an interchange, an exchange with my clients and with my friends and with my children, because as you always say, it's a teaching.
Yes.
It's teaching versus a therapy. I just happen to be a therapist using it, but anyone should be using it and everybody needs it. So the title we made this is that you look at self-acceptance work as a three-phase process, transforming pain into pleasure. So I'm going to hand it off to you and let you sort of explain your ideas about mental health, and we can kind of go into each of those phases and elaborate on it. Thank you so much.
Well, first of all, thank you, Karen, for doing this, for suggesting it, and for doing it with me, because I think, as you said, it really is needed today. And I know every therapist is full, and people who can't afford it really need it, just like people who can afford it. And hopefully someone listening who can't afford this can get something out of these talks that we've been having, because it really is about the body. And there are kind of three phases. As you know, I've been doing this for 50 some years and I'm still learning about it because it's a very inner work for myself, even as I work on myself, and I still am. It's amazing. I mean, you know, the life. I just heard someone say, you heard that phrase, we are spiritual beings having a human experience. And this person changed it to, we are spiritual beings having a spiritual experience. And you've heard me say for many years that we are all living our spiritual path, that whatever happens in our life is things that we've come in to learn. And it's a spiritual learning. So anyway, the three phases, as I'm seeing them more and more of healing, is that using the body, always, that's where we do the healing. It's not in the brain. Although we have very powerful brains, and learning how to use our brains in the proper way can change your life. And so what happens in the body is, because that body is pure energy, in utero, we are taking on trauma. As energy, we are in utero. From utero until about age 7, they're saying that we are in theta brain state, which is an unconscious state. And then we take on whatever's happening in our mother's world. Either what's happened to her as a child is in her being, and then what's happening in the world outside of her uterus. We take that on. And until we're 7 years old, we really don't have a way of synthesizing what's going on in our world. So we put it into our bodies. And I think Wilhelm Reich was the first person who, way back in the 1920s, was saying that just what I just said, that we carry everything that happens to us in our body. So this work is all about working with the body. So the first step really is introspection. And, you know, in your Mother's Day, my Mother's Day, for sure, because I'm a little older than you, but my Mother's Day, for sure, they didn't look at what happened to them as a child. You know, they just kind of lived their life and lived out all of that stress in their everyday life. That same thing is happening today. If you look around the world, everyone is living their childhood over and over and over. But today we have a little bit more introspection. Oh, I'm reacting to that person, but that really reminds me of what happened back there when so-and-so did this to me, or when this happened in my family. People are starting to look at that. And believe me, we are all living our childhood over and over every day until we start to introspect and say, oh, that happened. This is so similar to my childhood. This is what my mother did to me. And now my friends are doing it to me. I have friends that say that to me, and I just laugh because it's true. And what the government is happening to us, and what other nations are happening. It's just a reflection of what happened in my childhood. And so introspection is the most important part. If people don't introspect, they never know that it's a similar thing. And that's what talk therapy does very well. They introspect. Introspection is very important. If you don't have it, you don't know what's going on in the world. And the second part is the healing. And the healing has to happen in the body. And it usually happens through emotions. If the therapist can take you into your emotions, you will come, well, everyone who's had a really heavy crying experience, they know they feel better after, because the energy starts moving in your body out of these energy blocks that Wilhelm Reich, way back in the 1920s, started to talk about how when we have trauma, we take it into our body as an energy block. And when you start to go back into those, even if you go into the experience of today and really feel it, you will release energy. And I've been working with this one person for a year now. And they have a lot of anger about what's happening in the office. And almost every week, they end up doing a temper tantrum, you know, using their arms and legs and kicking, and they're on a couch, and we're on video, of course. And they'll yell as much as they can in their office. Sometimes they have to put a towel into their mouth because they want to yell so loud. And they'll yell and they'll beat with their hands and feet. And then they'll go into this altered state. And I usually leave them there for about 20 minutes, and then I leave and just say, I'll see you next week. And they're in bliss, because when you have a really important, extreme emotional experience, I always say, have an orgasm of it, you know, so you let go of control, and then you go into an altered state. The mind goes into an altered state.
And the truth is, Cherie, that when you let a child have a tantrum, when you really let them express, they go into an altered state as well. And so when you say introspect and you take someone back, the healing begins when it reminds you of something. And when you allow that expression, then you're healing not just right now, but you're healing that child that didn't get to express.
Exactly. Yeah, if all things were perfect, the mother would allow that. But when that happens, usually for people, as a mother or a father, they get scared because they weren't allowed to do that, and it scares them. So they stop the child. So anyway, this person that I've been working with has been working on his office problems for a year. And all of a sudden, a few weeks ago, he went back into his childhood, and it just happened. He just slipped back into a time when he was hiding and so scared of what was going on with this family. And he started to cry. Now, he didn't use voice. We're going to work on that. But his whole body shook and he was crying. Now, that's a second step. It's a closer, more in-depth healing. So from there, they may have to experience that several times to go back there and really let themselves feel the vulnerability. It's much more vulnerable than being angry at your office partners, right? But that vulnerability in that state of the child who has experienced the trauma of the childhood, whether it's fear or sadness or whatever it is, that vulnerable emotion, sadness is is a primary emotion. Anger is a secondary emotion because it's coming more from your power place. Not that it's better or worse, but that primary emotion is really the beginning of healing, when you can go back and feel your vulnerability. Sometimes I have to work with people for many years before they let themselves be vulnerable, that they're really in that child state. Now, the next step I like to do is take them back and have the same mother or the same father, only different, a father or mother who knows that this is just the child's way of being, to really heal. For instance, in that case where the child was so sad, to have the mother come and comfort the child. Maybe the mother couldn't do that. Maybe she was too busy. Maybe she was sick, or maybe she had her own troubles going on. So she didn't know, or sometimes they don't know that a child is in a closet crying all by himself, So that's the next step that I like to take them on. And that's the healing aspect. So there's first the introspection. And these don't have to go 1, 2, 3 at all, because often it's all mixed up. And then, so the second step is the healing. And the healing is going back and experiencing those emotions, that vulnerability, and also redoing it, having a fantasy, I like to call it a pretend, because pretend is a childlike word. Children pretend, they feel it, because children are into feeling much more than adults. So I have to pretend that it's happened differently than it did, because science has now proven that we make up a lot of what happened to us. We don't know, so the mind makes it up. And Dick and I often talk about the apple with a bite in it. And the bite, it looks kind of brown and like it's decaying. And we all say, that's how my life was. That's how my childhood was. And that we miss the rest of that beautiful, luscious, sweet apple, So we don't know how much that happened. That trauma could have just been once, or it could have been many times. But we can go back and pretend that it was different and heal it. So that's the second aspect. First, there's introspection, then there's the healing. And the third is the gifts. And many gifts we get back there and we don't realize that they're a gift of the trauma. You know, whatever that gift is that you are using in your life to complete your purpose. We all have a purpose here. And in my own self, my trauma, out of that trauma, I learned to be a mystic. I think we're all mystics, but mysticism really came into my life after a terrible trauma that happened for a number of years. And I would go to bed early in the morning, and I would just be lost in this mystical, wonderful, these feelings of going in and out of my body. And I've been a meditator ever since then. I didn't know what I was doing till I was 25, but I'd been meditating. And that's a very important part of my life and my mission in my life, meditation. So then the other gift is that I am able to sit with people who are suicidal without having any fear. And I can work with them. And a lot of psychiatrists have sent me their clients or their patients because they're afraid of it. It is a scary thing. But that was my gift.
I'll tell you, and any of the groups that I've done with you, and I know you have one coming up this weekend, that if anyone's interested, they can contact you. But in these groups, you know, the most amazing thing for me, it's really something I'm in awe of every time, is how you sit so calmly in the most extreme emotions. And so the room feels so safe because really nothing throws you. Nothing throws you. And I can even say, because of all the work that I've done and been in your groups, and that's the thing that I think strikes my clients the most, is they think they're going to scare me with something. And it's kind of like, I've seen everything, because you allow everything to be expressed to its fullest.
Right.
Let them come to the other side and feel the safety of that. Yes. And you're just sitting there, you haven't changed a thing. Expression
has changed. Yes. So those are the three aspects, the three phases that I see of SAT. So yeah,
you know, I'd like to kind of go back a little bit. You know, when you say introspection, yes, you know, we're looking back to our childhood. But what makes self-acceptance different is that thing of, what does it remind you of when you're feeling something in your body, right? So it's that reminder of what you felt before. That's the real difference between introspection in an analytic way versus from a body sense.
Yeah. Thank you for saying that. That is so true. And people are living in their childhood, especially today with all the stress that's happening in our world today. People are just living their childhood over and over and over again, and they don't realize that they are. If they would look at, what does this remind me of in my childhood, and look back there, that's the first step in healing. And the second step is to realize that actually the first step in that introspection is realizing that we all have these traumas stuck in our body as tension, and that you know, there's a thing on my website, a video by Dr. Robert Sayer. And he's a neurologist who has proven that animals in the wild release the tension as soon as they have the trauma. And animals in captivity, which we are in the captivity of culture, go into what he calls a brain freeze. That's what Wilhelm Reich called energy blocks. But we go into a brain freeze. Whereas the animal, and he proves this by showing a video of a polar bear, which is being chased by a helicopter, and and the polar bear is running and looking over his shoulder and running and looking over his shoulder, and then they freeze it. They shoot it with a dart and it goes unconscious. But when it comes back into consciousness, before it gets up, it's running and looking over its shoulder and running and looking over its shoulder. And then it goes into these deep belly breaths. And that's what happens in groups. You've seen this many times. When people go through the trauma, they end up with these deep belly breaths, and their whole body relaxes. And that's what happens in the wild. But because we're not in the wild, we're in a cage, just like animals in zoos. They go back and forth and back. They've got all this stress and they can't release it like they do in the wild. So
you're basically helping people finish something,
yeah.
It hasn't been able to be finished. Right. And it doesn't necessarily need to be dramatic. Sometimes it's just a buzz, but you feel this letting go slowly happening, and it turns into pleasure.
Pain and pleasure. And I ask people what they're feeling, and they'll say nothing because they think they have to have an emotion. Feelings are not emotions. Sometimes they are, but feelings are really sensations. That's what I'm always going from scratch. What are the sensations? So when people come to work with me, I ask them to close their eyes and breathe and tell me their sensations, because the body, go ahead. As going back to Wilhelm Reich, he discovered, because he was a scientist, Dr. Wilhelm Reich, and he was Freud's right-hand man. And Freud asked him to look at the body rather than the mind. And he discovered that we are energy, pure energy. And that's what he was working with. And that's really what I'm working with, just to get that energy flowing, either pleasure or pain. And people say, well, I'm not feeling either. And I said, oh, yes, you are. Because if we're in pleasure, often we're waiting for ecstasy at the end of that continuum. Or if we're in pain, we wait, till we're in excruciating pain, and we miss who we really are from moment to moment, with little pleasures and little pains. And those pains, those energy blocks, are really messages from our body to us. Our body is always talking to us, and sometimes screaming at us. If we're in extreme pain, that body is saying, you have a lesson here. Listen to me. And if we don't ignore it, or if we drug over it, we turn into disease. Dis-ease becomes disease. And it all starts with trauma.
Where would you put numbness on the scale of pleasure pain?
It's where I've just turned off. So I don't feel anything. Yeah.
So how would you address
that? A lot of people are in numbness.
Mm-hmm.
How would I address it? I ask them to breathe into the numbness and experience it. Just experience it without judging it. And that's part of self-acceptance. The definition of self-acceptance is to let myself experience whatever I am without judging or trying to analyze it or figure it out, but just to experience it. And when I experience whatever it is, it starts to let go. And if I can find a sentence, sometimes I feed a sentence as an experiment, not that I know that this is their truth, but I'll feed a sentence and there'll be change. If any change, if it gets tighter or looser, that tells me that's the body's truth. But often they'll say something and I'll say, oh, say that again, because I know that's their body's truth. They say it without thinking and they go on to say more and more and more, but I stop them and have them feel the sensation as they're saying that. And as they say it a few times, then either something will start changing. Well, it will. It'll, if it's true, it'll get worse. The pain will get worse, or it'll get better. Either one is the truth. Yeah, so pleasure or pain is basically what we're always in. Little pleasures, little pains.
Right.
And we can change. We are always in the process of changing.
And we live in a culture that's so problem solving. It's really hard to get people out of the practice of trying to figure things out. And it's so simple. And, you know, when you really keep saying, what are you feeling in your body? What are you feeling in your body? Say this, you throw a tool. What are you feeling in your body? And people sometimes are frustrated because they don't understand that this is what it's about, just underlining what is, allowing what is, and then things change. And that's really the magic of self-acceptance work.
That is true.
And then the other thing I wanted you to touch on too, in this sort of phase of the healing piece, is how we, all of us, have blockages. We all hold emotions. Anything unexpressed is sort of held if it needed to be expressed, but we all hold it differently in different places in the body. And we developed what you call personality structures, which to me, it's self-acceptance away from a lot of other practices because of that particular piece, which seems so important to understand. So go ahead.
Yes, and personality structures were developed by Dr. Alexander Lowen, who actually was a patient of Dr. Wilhelm Reich, and he was actually a lawyer, I think, and he got so turned on to Wilhelm Reich's work, Reichian therapy, that he went back to school and became a psychiatrist, and he developed personality structures. And personality structures are ways that we've all discussed. There's 5 of them, and we all have a little bit of each one, and we each have 1 or 2 that are really, really kind of stand out in our personality. And they're all ways that we have learned through that terrible river of childhood to take on certain aspects, certain ways of being that have healed, have helped us to get through. And actually, I could go on for 2 or 3 hours about just the personality structures. We should probably do
a separate one, but maybe just give a little bit, because I think it's kind of like astrology. People are interested in that.
Yeah, I want to just say basically how different these 5 different aspects happen at different periods of growth in the as a child goes through different stages of growth. So the first one, I don't like to use, Dick and I changed the names because Lowen has very psychological names for them. I don't know if I should say the psychological names or not, but the first one.
I think you should, because of how you changed it to more of an adaptive positive versus pathological.
Yeah, so the first one is called the schizoid in Lowen's terms. And it happens often in utero or in the very first few days with the mother. If the mother has a lot of anger and the child is being held by the mother, and the child will pick that up, anger or fear. And so Lowen calls that the schizoid. And Dick and I, because we look at the positive aspect, we call it the creative structure. And these people are very creative in whatever they do. I have a lot of creative structure. And so I, in my work, I'm very creative sometimes. Things just kind of come out of me when I'm in that flow state. And that's, and any, when you look at all the creativity in the world, I think these people are often ahead of our times. If you look at songs that come out and movies that come out and art especially, they're really ahead of our time. They're not in their bodies as much as other people would be. They make very good mystical people. We're all, as I said, we're all mystics, but my creative structure has brought me into my meditation and my creativity and my work, you know. So that's the first one. The second one, Lowen called the oral. I have a great deal of that. And that's usually created if there's trauma during the sucking stages. And that child really is in touch with their love and with their heart. And I recently learned a few years ago that in utero, the mouth and the heart are being developed at the same time in the fetus. Interesting, very interesting stuff when you start to look at how the science is coming together with all the psychology. So Lowen calls that the oral structure. We call it the lover structure because that's what they do. When, you know, they make good nurses and anyone who's a caretaker. The third one, Lowen calls the masochist, and we call it the endurer structure. This is the kind of person who'll hang in there with you. If you're having trouble or if you have a disease, they're not going to abandon you. And they tend to kind of hold their energy in, but they're the kind of person that can sit in a discussion where everybody's going, well, I believe this, and I believe this, and I believe this, and and they'll just sit there. And then at the end, they'll come out with this beautiful form of what everybody's been said, but they can hold their energy back. They don't have to be out there every second. But that's the endurer. And the next one is Lowen calls the psychopathic, and we call it the challenger protector. And these people are really protecting their own little child. And so often they get into challenges and they're very protective of if you're little, if you're needy, they'll be really right there for you. But they challenge the world. They make good cops. They make good doctors because they take the challenge of saving your life, you know. And the last one, Lowen calls the rigid, and we call it the achiever. And the rigid has an armoring. They've armored their whole body so they don't feel as easily as a lover structure, for instance, who feels so much. But they are very, very successful in this world. Lowen said that the rigid structure is the most successful in this world. So if you have any part of that structure, you'll be successful in your life. And I look back at my life. I mean, I talked about my creative structure and my lover structure. And because I was the firstborn, mothers who, with their first baby, they're so proud of that first. Oh, look, my baby's walking. Oh, my baby's talking. Oh, my baby, you know. And so the first one really has a lot of expectations from the parents to perform, and the rigid or the achiever structure will do very well at whatever they want to achieve. So all of these structures have good points and hard points, hard lessons, because that's what we as spiritual beings have come in to learn, all these lessons. And I believe self-acceptance really helps you learn the lessons by taking you through your body, through the traumas, through the trauma into the altered state. And when you get into that altered state, you learn things that you don't know in this lifetime, but you do know. I call it knowing without knowing. That when we get into an altered state, there's so much information available to us in that state. And we know without knowing. And then all of a sudden something will happen in my life and I'll know. So that's what's so exciting for me with self-acceptance, that to see people going into that altered state after they go into the trauma.
Well, that's kind of the point of knowing what the personality structures are, because they have gifts and they did save the child, and they get in the way of you feeling that your potential, which is that flow state that you're talking about. And so you can't get to the flow state unless you bring out, right, the structure and have it be seen so that it can be moved aside, just so that you can now experience the flow. So that's what's so beautiful about it, is when you experience some sort of resistance, what you know is something's up. What's up? Probably the protector of the child, which is their personality structure. So then you help them see that, and you have all kinds of tools that work with each structure.
I think that's so important, because people can start to judge their structure and to realize that that structure not only saved your life, but gave you some very important tools to create what you want to create with your life. Yes. So pleasure, and pain, here we are back to that again. This and the state of healing or decaying.
Yes. And then
the energy blockages really come out as personality structures. And so if you look around the world today with all the stress that people are in and the way they're reacting to their stress, you'll see these personality structures. I think we really should do a whole video on them.
Yeah.
That'll be exciting to do.
Yeah. So we'll bookmark that, because I think it's such a huge part of the work, and what sets it apart, and why it's such powerful work. And it has changed my life. My endurer structure, which sits on my energy, can be passive aggressive, all these things. They were all things to protect me. And when I was able to address them, then I could move them, and then I could be more direct. So.
Well, I have to give a lot of credit to Alexander Lowen, Dr. Alexander Lowen, Wilhelm Reich also, for, these things have been around for eons, and especially the meditation too. I mean, the masters have been saying the same thing in many different ways throughout the ages. But bioenergetics coming out of Lowen in the 70s and 80s have been very helpful, because bioenergetic exercises are ways that they're actually exercises to take you back into childlike states of being. And like doing a temper tantrum or sucking your thumb, to really, or just letting yourself be that tiny child and being held by the mother, by a loving mother. All of these exercises that bioenergetics offers are ways of taking you back into being that child in a more powerful way, to find your own power, to find your comfort, and change. So today, there's so many people dealing with anxiety and depression. I think we need to talk about that a little bit.
And really from the lens of how you see it through self-acceptance, like what is anxiety? What is depression as you look at it when you're working with a person or a friend or family who's dealing with anxiety and depression? What does that tell you?
Well, that brings me to breath, which I have a lot to say about breath, because anxiety is breathing the wrong way. I'll get into that. And depression is not breathing so shallowly and not moving, and not letting yourself express. So anxiety is also breathing the wrong way and putting your head in a lot of, going into your head more with fear. So breath, I think I know breath is the most important thing we can ever do. It's the first thing we do when we come in. We take a breath, and the last thing we do when we die, we let go of the breath. And during that time, we are constantly breathing. And when you're breathing, you're stimulating your heart center, that energy center right behind the thymus gland, which now science has proven that when we open that heart center, which is really the thymus gland, breathe into it. It's right here. That's why so many people, when they're meditating, they start and they end, Qigong, they start and they end with that. Their hands right over that breastbone, which is right in front of the thymus center. When you breathe into the thymus center, the thymus sends a chemical to the brain, and the brain then slows down and sends a chemical back to the thymus center. That chemical, I forget the first one, but that chemical is oxytocin. So the thymus center receives the oxytocin, and from the oxytocin creates stem cells. So those stem cells are going out from the heart center all the time throughout our whole body if we breathe. And it also creates, the oxytocin also creates good feelings like love, gratitude, compassion, forgiveness, all those wonderful, positive, I don't like to positive or negative feelings, but those more creative feelings are happening because of oxytocin, which means breath. And I always like to talk about this story. I know you know this story very well. I've told you many, many times. You've heard it. I mean, in groups, of the musk deer, because the musk deer is very much like us. The musk deer drops out of his mother's uterus and takes its first breath, like we all do, and suddenly smells this amazing smell. And it loves this smell so much that it struggles to its feet, and it starts running and running and running and running and running after the smell. And it runs to exhaustion and finally just drops in exhaustion and takes another breath. And then it realizes that the smell is coming from within. And that's what none of us know. We're running, 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 running in the world. We're just like the musk deer, looking outside of us for what's inside. And, that's what the great beings have been telling us for eons, telling everybody, go in, breathe. And it is with the breath that we go in. And when we take a breath in, we stimulate the heart. And the heart is the center of love and compassion. So Lowen again creates these 3 types of breath. He notices that in our culture, we have 3 different types of breath. And the first one he calls the neurotic breath. The neurotic breath is inhale, hold, exhale, inhale, hold, exhale, inhale, hold, exhale. Now, what happens is I inhale, fill my body with energy, and hold it, it goes into my head. And that's where most of our world is, in their heads. They don't feel their body. They're just going, and thinking. And so those people have a hard time coming down into their body. The second kind of breath is the hyperventilative breath. And that's inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale, inhale. And if you breathe like that for a while, you probably will have this clawing of your hands and your mouth. And you might end up going to the hospital and they give you a paper bag to breathe in, right? But many, many people, as I've worked with them and I observe their breathing kind of inhale, exhale, and they aren't aware of it. And they are so anxious. Their whole life is run on anxiety. Now, the first thing we do when we are in a fearful place is what? We take a breath in, right? But many people are living in that constant, and I'm exaggerating, but that's what they are doing. Now, the last one is inhale, exhale, hold. See, when you inhale, you're charging your body. When you exhale, you're discharging. And if you hold it out, you continue to exhale. You continue to release that energy. And so that's a breath that I like to teach. And it's been the way I've been teaching meditation, the way I've meditated since I was a young girl, pregnant, and found that way of breathing in a book called Childbirth Without Fear. And that book was my Bible for 5 years in a row, being pregnant 5 years in a row. I read it every day and I practiced it every day because I was so fearful of childbirth. Well, until the first one, I was very fearful, but because I learned this way of breathing, my body went into an altered state and I had the most pain-free, quick births because I was in a meditative state. So that's the way what I like to really teach people is to take long, slow inhalations, a slight hold at the top of the inhalation, and then a long, 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 long exhalation, slowly exhaling out, 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 and hold it out for a few seconds or a little longer or a little longer. And then take another slow inhalation. Hold it a second and then exhale long, slow, 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 and hold it out, hold it out, hold it out. That will take you into an altered state because it brings up your autonomic nervous system. And everything slows down in your body. Your heart slows down. The heart sends a message to the brain. The brain slows down. And you go into what people are now calling heart-brain coherence, where everything is working together, the brain and the body. It makes such a difference in your life. If people would take 10 or 15 minutes and do this a few times a day, and some people are doing this breath work I know a friend who's doing this breath work a half hour 3 times a day, and he's healed himself from many, many problems in his body. It's very healing.
You often pair it with grounding, where you have people just put attention in the bottom of their feet or feel roots coming through the bottom of their feet.
Yes. Well, it's a very grounding exercise, a way of breath, because not only does it take you into an altered state, but your body goes in, your energy goes down through your body in that breath. So breath takes us into mindfulness, meditation. And meditation can be, maybe 5 minutes of just breathing like that, and you will find yourself different in that altered state. And a lot of times people use what they call mantras. It could be anything, any word. You could use the word one. If you repeat the word one, you do that for a couple minutes and you're going to feel so peaceful.
So yeah, that also brings up the idea of sound and how you use sound in your work.
Sound is energy. Number one, energy is everything. Everything is energy because we are an electromagnetic field of energy. If you go into quantum physics, that's what quantum physics really teaches, that everything is energy, and we as bodies are an electromagnetic field that surrounds us and is inside of us. It moves in and out of us and all around us. And that field is who we really are. We don't just stop here, we're out there, way out there. And when you start to explore that, you're in for a wonderful, wonderful way of being in your life.
You talk about the tube within the tube in your book, the Becoming Alive and Real book.
Oh, yeah.
In that tube within.
When Jason and I published that book, Jason was really published it for me. And I remember you first told me, oh, Cherie, there's 3 more books in you. And I didn't believe you, but as we've been doing these interviews, I think I could do 3 more books. There's so much to it. But yes, we are a tube within a tube, but we're more than that tube. I mean, from our mouth to our anus, we are a tube. And then we're also this tube of skin. But that tube goes out into this electromagnetic field, which is, as I said, within us and all around us. And when you start to explore that, you become more aware and you go into altered states. Mm-hmm. Become more aware of who you are and how other people are affecting you. That other people's energy does affect you. Sometimes it's a wonderful thing. And other times they come into your field and then you have troubles because we are all individuals and you've got different things happening. And that happens a lot in relationship, where, as Einstein talked a lot about the entanglement of quantum physics, and we are quantum physics. And as people, we can become entangled with the people that we care about. And we have a lot in common. We talk and talk, and pretty soon we're entangled. And I've worked with myself and my daughter a lot because she and I are so much alike and love each other so much. And all of a sudden we become entangled and we have troubles. And I have to then separate myself, and she has to separate herself. And so if you don't know how to do that, you get into a lot of struggles, emotional struggles with people that you love. And that's what's happening a lot in the world today too, because people aren't aware. Awareness is almost everything. Because if I'm not aware, I don't know what's happening to me, but I'm sure experiencing it and reacting to it. And if you are aware, you will be learning about who you are throughout your life. And it's very rewarding. It's not always easy, but the lessons which we've all come in here to learn are there. And they're saying, look at me, look at me, look at me. And most people are running away. And that, unfortunately, in this culture, the world is saying, look at me, look at me, look at me, look at yourself. And people are doing a lot of things to not look at themselves,
Well, just kind of the topic of anxiety and depression, because depression also has kind of a feeling of hopelessness in it, is that when you let yourself be carried away by the world and what's happening, or when you're like me, which is like a recovering worrier, it's getting, caught in the mind into this rat wheel of thought. So talk a little bit more about that and what you do for that. I think you've already touched on some things, but I just wanted to, because I think we all do get caught in our minds so much that I wanted to give it a little bit more attention.
Yes. Well, I've often talked about the mind of thoughts being runaway horses. Those in those, yeah, well, that's because I'm coming out of, the old Westerns where there'd be this girl in this what buck wagon did they call it? And the horses would run and she'd be screaming and then the hero would come and rescue her. And I've thought about that as, what we can do, what happens with our thoughts, that they can really be running away with us and taking us to places we don't want to be. And yet we're helpless unless we become aware, And so in this work, I'm really trying to teach people to be, number one, be aware. Oh my God, there's another negative thought. And of course, the culture right now is full of negativity, full and overflowing. And people need to really be aware that of what you're putting into your mind. If you're watching a lot of the news, you're watching or even podcasts. I love some of the podcasts that are out right now because there's so much healing that can happen, so much learning out there, wonderful stuff. And then there's movies, and movies can be really negative, with all the violence and stuff. Mm-hmm. So be aware, or even all the miserable love affairs, It's like it can just take you back into your own miserable love affairs. And so be aware. I recently, this last year, that I fell and broke my leg in 2 places. And that happened to me a week after I had signed up and paid for a week-long retreat with this person I've been training with or learning from for 4 years now. And I wanted to be with him in person so badly. And it's very expensive, and I had paid for it all, and bam, there's no way I could go. And people said to me, aren't you upset about that? Well, I was a little upset, but I didn't let myself linger there. Because I believe there are no such things as accidents. That I fell and broke my leg, the first thing I thought was, oh my God, I've got some lessons to learn here. I didn't know what they were, but I learned so much in that. It took me 9 months to heal totally. Because of my age, everything was slow, and a few encounters with the medical establishment that didn't go well. So, first of all, I looked at it as lessons, not as a disappointment. I mean, of course I was disappointed, but I knew that it was more important for me, the lessons I had to learn. And sure enough, my horses started running away. Here I was, 84, and thinking, oh my God, the rest of my life, I'm going to be in a wheelchair. I was in a lot of pain. And I had bone on one leg already, which I had been working with for 5-6 years. All of a sudden, the other leg, the one I broke, had bone on bone. So every step was pain. What are you going to do with that? Are you going to be miserable and complaining and letting your mind go, yeah, you're going to be in a wheelchair? That's what my mind wanted to do. And I would not let myself go there. I would not. Every time I'd catch myself, awareness. And
you taught me the cancel sign. Yeah, something like that.
Change. Well, that. Oh, yeah, that. Yeah, that's an old Wicca thing. Yeah.
Really?
But then I also learned that when you can catch your thinking, to shout to yourself, change. And I do that, especially in the middle of the night. That's the time. About 3 a.m. is when your liver kicks in or something, and you kind of go into a wake up state, and your mind starts going negative. And as soon as I do that, I say out loud, change. I'm talking to, listen to me, change. Or sometimes lately I've been singing, I'm so grateful, gratitude before me, gratitude behind me, gratitude all around me. I'm so grateful. I'll sing that in the middle of the night rather than go into all that crap that my mind wants to think. So
you also have that mantra, oh my mind, oh my mind.
Oh my mind, oh my mind. Have mercy, oh my mind. Baba Muhayyaddin. Yeah, taught me that one. That's a great one. Oh my mind, oh my mind. I have a video, a tape of him saying only that in some, I think it's Malayalam, some language from Sri Lanka. And it's being translated as he says it. And for a half hour, all he's saying is, oh my mind, have mercy, oh my mind, have mercy, oh my mind, oh my mind. Great. So there are all these tricks.
Yeah.
You can choose to learn. And, I talked a little bit before about, we're talking about sound here, that mantras are so important because it can take you into altered states. But chanting, any kind of chant, just even one, as I said before. But
I just used one of yours for, the one for impossible situations where I just have one there's no answer right now. And it was, I give thanks for help unknown already on the way. Ooh, it's a good one.
Yes. I learned that from Dick Alney. He was the one who really brought me into this work when he was just starting to develop self-acceptance training. And then together we worked together for 13 or 14 years developing it, and it's still developing. But he was really a genius. And really saved my life and raised my children, and they're incredible people, as you know, some of them. But chanting and sound is so important because sound is energy, just like everything else in this life. It's all energy. And if I can utilize sound, I can literally change my energy in my body. So that's why a lot of the great beings would say chant, chant, chant. Meditate, 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 or chant, chant, chant. And it really does make a difference. But that also brings me to what we do in our work, Karen. And as people come and they want to talk about, this person is doing this to me, or that person did this. And we always have them talk to the person, not about the person. And when people start training with me, they don't quite get that. But what happens is that when I come and tell you about this story, about this person, about what they did, it doesn't change anything. But what it does is it creates a tension in you. And that's how so many therapists get burnt out, listening to all this crap all day long. And because we do affect each other's energy. And so I don't let people tell me their story. And this I learned from Dr. Alexander Lowen, not Lowen, but Gestalt therapy, Fritz Perls. He said, the I, thou, if I can always do an I, thou, talk to that person. So when people start telling me their story about this person or that, I'll say, talk to the person.
Imagined in front of you.
I don't really even go into that, but they do imagine that they're there. I
just wanted people to know you don't go find the person and talk to them. I'm talking about in a session. They might think that that's what so I wanted to be clear that you're imagining the person and you're talking to them and you're imagining.
No, I'm just there with the person. But when they talk to the person rather than about them, it changes their energy because it's more real. I might have someone who just lost their mother telling me about how sad they are. And I'll say this to her. Whoa, they feel a lot more. And I don't have to take that sadness on as I'm listening. And this is what happens with couples. So often the person comes home from work and wants to tell you about this other person at work that's driving her mad and driving her crazy, and you take it on. So it's always important to, if you're in that place, you're not a therapist, you can't say, well, talk to that person, but you can kind of protect your aura. Don't take it in. Don't get entangled, because that's what happens. I think it was Carolyn Mace talked about how, she didn't use the word entanglement, but she's talked about how people would develop almost a vocabulary where they would be talking about their problems to each other, and they would get entangled, woundology, she called it. So I'll tell you about my wounds, and then you tell me about your wounds, and then we'll be good friends.
That's called in today's culture trauma bonding. Is that what they call it? Trauma bonding. Yeah.
Yeah. It started with Carolyn Mace way back in the 70s. She was talking about woundology. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then we have our own special talks. We feel together, but it brings us both down.
Well, I think also that the idea of talking to a person brings you back also in time to the trauma that's in the body, and you can move it. If you're talking about it, you're in the present. You're not able to kind of access that. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
So let's, as time is going on here, I'd like you to just elaborate a little bit more on, although you've touched upon it quite well, on the role of spirituality and self-acceptance work, because I think that even science is coming to understand that without it's not religion per se, but it's this idea that we're part of something bigger than this body. And without that, it's very hard to heal.
Exactly.
So yeah, speak about that a little bit.
Jung, I think, was the first psychiatrist who really looked at the real, which is what we are, the real. I remember in the last Great Recession back in 2008, when my clientele went way down, and I went out for coffee, and I happened to see a person who had his office right next to mine. He had been out for coffee too. And he said, oh, how's your clientele? And I said, well, it's way down. And he said, yeah, mine too, but it's not the real. And when he said that, I said to him, oh, are you listening to Eckhart Tolle? Because I had been working with Eckhart Tolle, and sure enough, he was. But Eckhart was the first one to talk about what happens in that altered state as being the real. And, here we are. And as I said at the beginning here, that we are really spiritual beings living a spiritual life, spiritual experience. No matter what happens in your life, that is a spiritual experience that will teach you something. I often think about this young man who actually married a client of mine, and he was a follower of Amachi, one of my dearest teacher. And when he was, I think, a young 12-year-old or something, went down a slide into a pool, but for some reason he ended up breaking his spine and became a paraplegic. This happened years and years ago. But he ended up on a spiritual path because of this. And he's brilliant. He's a brilliant man, and now has his own child, who's, I think, a teenager at this point. But the fact that whatever happens to us in our life can be a miracle. Or it can be the end of our life. We can want to die, and pretty soon we do. You know,
Right.
it's all how we look at what is really happening around us. And that coming into that, that we are the real, that the world is here just to teach us some lessons. And it's really just a kind of a matrix that isn't who we are.
You know, there's something happening that is interesting and concerning in a way for me, is that there are ways to, besides self-acceptance and through other ways, to access that experience of something greater than us, that essence, that world of answers, the miracles, all that places, all that. And some people use psilocybin and other such things to get to it more quickly. And I think it's useful. I'm not saying it's not useful, but I think some people then bypass the work it takes to get to that understanding through the body. And so that's why I think you can get there many ways. But the beauty of self-acceptance is that you're able to move through the traumas, the pain, and transform it. And so then it sustains. So you don't have to keep taking something to get to that, right? I mean, I wonder what you thought about that.
Well, that's what Ram Dass discovered, you know, because he was the great, he and what was his name, who tune in and tune out and turn on and tune out, or something. What was his compatriot who got into LSD back in the 70s? Anyway, Ram Dass was very much into, you know who Ram Dass was, right?
Sure.
Yeah. And he was very much into tripping and had these wonderful trips. And then he went to India and discovered that his teacher was there all the time. In fact, he said his teacher comes up to him. And first of all, his teacher said to him, because he was really poo-pooing the whole thing, you know, he was just there with somebody else and didn't believe that everybody was touching this person's feet and blah, blah, blah. And he was like, oh, this is bullshit. So his teacher comes up and said, oh, you were out looking at the moon last night, weren't you? And Ram Dass said, yes. And he said, you were talking to your mother. And Ram Dass said, yes. And your mother died of, and he told him what his mother had died of. And how did you know? And he said, because, you know, just, I know. So he started following this teacher. And one day he had LSD in his pocket, a bunch of LSD tabs. And his teacher says, give me one of those, give me some of that stuff. And just pulls them out of his pocket, and his teacher grabbed a whole handful and swallowed it. And nothing changed. His teacher said, so? He realized that his teacher, without any LSD, was on this wonderful trip all the time. And so he decided to follow his teacher and give up drugs.
Wow.
I think that's exactly what you're saying. It can help you. In fact, they're using LSD now for people, elders who are terrified of death.
Absolutely.
And there's that. Sure. And people who have terrible PTSD.
It's very effective.
So, yeah. So it's
and it's true. You know, you can't, sometimes you need something to even get you to be able to do a group with you, or to work with me, or you know, to even get them in front of us, you need something to assist. And yes. So it's useful, but you don't want to become that. You don't want to, I think, go around, you know, try to take a shortcut to not have to deal with stuff.
He was tired of coming down. He'd go up, but he'd have to come down. Exactly. And you don't have to come down when you're meditating. You can be in that space, right, maybe in this lifetime, but I would say 95% of the time. You know, when people come into that altered state, you've often heard me say, this is the most important part of the work. Your body is memorizing that this is who you really are. This pure divine love. And Dick used to say back in the 70s, because we live in an anti-life culture, when you go into that state after the work, you're learning that you can be in this state 95% of the time. Now, I don't know, maybe it's 98%, 90% of the time, because the culture seems to be getting more and more anti-life. But
the more you stay there, that's why you have people linger and let it, it's not just for that moment, it's that you carry it with you and you can access it. So the idea, you often made this kind of, this is how we want to be in the world. It's a certain inner flexibility so that whatever's happening in the world is not breaking you. It's just allowing you to move with it, but not be, right? And so your body needs to like have more of that feeling of that flexibility, that essence, so that you can, in your walking and waking life, you can tap into it, or it'll just kind of come up, right? Yeah.
Yeah, as the great beings used to say, be in the world, but not of it. You know.
Thus the key to mental health.
Right. Right.
Yeah. So I don't know if there's anything else you wanted to say about the 3 phases: introspection, healing, and the gifts. Gratitude. Did you want to say anything further on that? Because I have one final question before we finish.
Just, that the gifts are worth it, that they are there. I think I mentioned that they are there before we realize that the gifts really come out of the trauma, you know, and that they can be there before we're healed. You know, I was meditating since I was 5. I was looking outward for where can I find it in the world? I was going to all kinds of religions and churches and all different kinds of things to find what was inside of me. And I didn't even know it was inside of me at that time. That would happen to me, you know, how can I get it all the time? So the gifts were there way before I really did any healing on my work, on my childhood, or even knew that I was traumatized. And that's the problem. Most people don't even know they're traumatized. And we all have been traumatized because our souls have chosen to come into this world to heal. You know, we've chosen this. And once we realize that, we don't have to be the victim. So, yeah.
Once you're willing to take that leap in terms of doing that work that allows you to go into the pain and turn it to pleasure, once you can do that, what organically comes, at least in my work with people, and I've seen it with you working with people, is that place of gratitude, the gifts. It just emerges. All of a sudden, that mother they hated so much, they kind of can see her side of the story, and you didn't have to put them in that direction. They're like, you know, she really was this and this. And I'm like, okay, we've gotten there, right? Yeah.
That is true. And gratitude, they're saying that gratitude is the greatest emotion that we can feel. And it truly is. It's just amazing when you make a ritual of being grateful. You don't even have to think about what you have. But I think I've been recently doing, I think I told you, a ritual every morning of singing my gratitudes, not for what I want, but for what I have, just the little things like my bed. All my life, I've been an early riser, up and at 'em in the morning. And now I lay there for a few minutes. Oh, I really love this bed. And when I go to bed, oh my God, it feels so good at the end of the day. I never let myself feel that before, just like up and down, and that's it. But just simple things like my dog, or like the beautiful redwood trees in my backyard, or the bird. And then I always ask for a message of some kind at the end of my meditation in the morning. And I had a rough time this last week, and I asked for a message. And I had this bird. I have an overhang over my porch. So birds don't normally, so although sometimes they fly in and sit on my rocking chair I have out there. But this bird flew right at my window. I thought he was going to come in. And right at the last minute, he flew out. And I thought, that's my message. So looking for the synchronicities in life are so important, because I really believe the energy, the universe is giving us messages, synchronicities all the time, that life is love, that we are love.
So Cherie, this is my final question I wanted to ask you. Is that the answer? This is what I wanted to know, because I've known you for a long time and you've never aged. You're 85 years old now, if I could say that. You did say last year you were 84, so I don't think and you're clearly, anyone who meets you says there's just no way you could be that age, but there's something about you that is timeless. And I wondered if you wanted to share your secret to that. I mean, I think you've touched upon some of it, but just to let people know what they can do to continue to be satisfied and happy in their life.
Well, I think as we age, things slow down, and I think it gives us more time, if we will take it, for growth. And I think growth is the number one word. That for me, I've always been looking at growing. And there's three ways that I think you grow. One is definitely through meditation, because in that meditation, we come into the fact that we are intelligence. It's all there available for us. Whatever we want to know, it'll come if we open ourselves to it. And that's what meditation is an opening. So meditating, number one. Exercise. Boy, you have to move, especially as you get older, but even as you're young. And it's harder and harder in this world, because technology has opened us all up to even more wonderful ways of growing, if we want to grow intellectually and spiritually, and in all ways. Technology is really an amazing thing. It does have negativities in it, in our culture too, but exercise, getting up and moving, and so exercise is another thing, especially as you get older, not to just sit. And awareness. Because if you're not aware, you will not grow. If you're not aware, oh, this is happening. What does this mean? What do I have to learn here? But first of all, you have to be aware that. So it all comes down to growth. Am I open to growing? And I think as I'm getting older, I realize that age is really a blessing, because things slow down and you have more time to look at yourself, look at the world, and more time to meditate. But I think no matter how old you are, you have to make the time. But as I see elders, they're either, just as younger people, they're either growing or decaying, one or the other.
You're growing. You've really thrived in this 3-year plus pandemic, and you've continued to create.
Even though I had that amazing growth spurt of breaking my leg, I was still working.
Look how you just framed that.
But
amazing growth spurt.
Oh yeah. Amazing growth spurt, because I learned that through my meditation, and people might think this is a little crazy, which it is, I would meditate for an hour. And in that hour, I would pretend that I was walking in my future without pain. and I'd get up and I'd be able to walk for an hour without pain. And then it was a day without pain. And then it was a couple days without pain. And now I am walking in my future without pain. So what were you saying, Karen, before?
Well, just to finish, I just wanted to direct people. Number one, you have a Zoom group, so you can see anyone around the world coming up this coming weekend, right? This 16th. It's a Friday night, Saturday, and Sunday. Powerful transformational group that I would highly recommend people, I don't know how many slots are left, but this is something you don't want to miss. You're the master of it. And so that's coming up this weekend, and also your book, if you want to just get a little more in depth about what Cherie was talking about, Becoming Alive and Real, Journey into the Body's Truth. It's not a very thick book, but boy, is it full of lots of wisdom. And your website, which is www.selfacceptance.us.
Yes,
So,
if people want to know what I'm doing in the future, they can always go and sign up for future mailings if they want.
And a lot of the interesting videos and
Yes. I always, if people first come to me, I say, go to my website and look at the videos, because this work really is a teaching. I view it as a teaching rather than a therapy. People call me all kinds of things, including healer, therapist, whatever. But I really view myself as a teacher, and they can learn a lot through these interviews that you and I have been doing.
Yes, well, thank you for being my teacher. And until the next conversation.
And thank you for all that you are, Karen. Okay.
Love you.
Love you. Bye.